Chocolate cream cheese frosting without butter is easy and delicious. As you can see, it only has a few simple ingredients and it's the best because of the combination of flavors. The bitterness of the cocoa powder, the sweetness of the powdered sugar, and the tanginess of the cream cheese. The basis for this recipe is my cream cheese frosting with no butter recipe. If you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out. I'll put a link below. So I'm going to start off with 1 8-ounce block of softened cream cheese, 1 pound or 454 grams of powdered sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. In order to turn this into a chocolate cream cheese frosting recipe, I need to add 2 things. The first of which is cocoa powder. I am going to add at least 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Measured in grams, about 40 grams. I have an additional 2 tablespoons off to the side, so I may go for half of a cup. I'm not quite sure. I was experimenting with this chocolate cream cheese frosting recipe earlier, and here I did 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, and about 100 grams of powdered sugar. This is really good, but it's more of a milk chocolate. I haven't had Hershey's chocolate or something like that in a long time, but from what I remember, it's similar to that. Don't get me wrong, it's delicious if you like that. Then in this recipe, only use 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. But if you want something with a more intense chocolate flavor, then you're going to need to use more. I'm not quite sure how much more, so I'm going to start off with just 6 tablespoons. Because as every chef knows, you can always add more later, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to take away. I'm also going to add some water. This may seem a bit odd. You may be saying, Parnell, I think you've lost your chef hat. But if you've ever worked with cocoa powder before, it's really dry. And if you add cocoa powder to a normal recipe in order to turn it into a chocolate version, many times you're going to have to add some more liquid because that cocoa powder, it's so dry, it's just going to suck up all the moisture. As with the cocoa powder, it's always easier to add more later. So I'm going to be very conservative with the water starting out. I added water to this, 2 tablespoons, but the cream cheese was kind of dry. So I'm going to add the water bit by bit. A lot of recipes call for milk, but like I said, I used water with this and it tastes absolutely fine to me. The first step is going to be creaming the cream cheese, the vanilla extract, and the salt. And then after that, I'm going to start with my dry ingredients. My cream cheese is now creamed. Now I'm going to start adding the cocoa powder and powdered sugar to make my icing. I usually add about 1/4 cup of powdered sugar at a time. If you add too much, you will be covered in a cloud of powdered sugar. Since I'm adding 2 dry things, I'm going to add probably about 1/8 of a cup of each at a time. I took a fork just to break up some of the clumps in my powdered sugar because it's kind of old. I honestly don't think you have to sift it, but I'm going to sift the powdered sugar and the cocoa powder. I honestly think it's more critical to sift the powdered sugar, or excuse me, the cocoa powder. But like I said, I don't think it's absolutely critical. When you add a little bit more cocoa powder and powdered sugar, what you might want to do before turning on your mixer is try to use the beaters themselves to mix the dry ingredients in a little bit, so that way when you turn the power on, everything does not fly up into a cloud. So see, I'm just going to take my beaters and mix it down a little bit. Get it incorporated somewhat. I'm going to turn on my beaters. And see, that way there's less of a cloud. At this point, I've added all of the 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and I'd say maybe a third of the powdered sugar. At this point, to be honest, I've stopped sifting the powdered sugar. I'm kind of running low on time and a little bit on patience, not gonna lie. Almost all of the powdered sugar is now incorporated into my chocolate cream cheese frosting. I tasted it and it tastes amazing. Although I have been using my fork to clean off the beaters, one thing I wanted to show you that you can do is you can press them against the sides like this. So if they are full like that with frosting, just run them against the sides. And now they look a lot cleaner. I just finished incorporating all the powdered sugar into the frosting. I tasted it. It tastes amazing. Even though it tastes really good, it is a bit on the thick side. My experiment looks a little bit smoother. It's not quite as thick. I think it's because of the water. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. I'm going to do half a tablespoon at a time, and then I'm going to beat and see how it looks. So far I've added 1.5 tablespoons of water. It's almost to where I want it. I'm going to add another half a tablespoon, and that should do the trick. Adding a bit of water definitely helped to make it very smooth. Although the frosting definitely looked good, it tasted even better. I don't eat chocolate cake very much, and honestly, I eat chocolate frosting even less frequently, but I can tell you that this frosting was fantastic. Really, what I think made this frosting so good was the combination of flavors. The bitterness of the cocoa powder, the sweetness of the powdered sugar, and the tanginess of the cream cheese. What I really liked about the frosting was its strong chocolate flavor. It was almost kind of like a dark chocolate frosting. It had a very deep, rich chocolate flavor without being overly sweet. Although you might think that the flavor of the cream cheese would compete against the flavor of the chocolate, honestly, I didn't think so. I thought that they both combined very nicely. Although cream cheese does have a bit of tang, which is a strong flavor, it has less fat than butter. Fat coats your tongue, making it more difficult to taste other flavors. Less fat, along with a few other things, is the main reason why gelato has a stronger flavor than traditional ice cream. My guess is that that is what happened in this chocolate cream cheese frosting with no butter. Since there was less fat, the chocolate flavor came through loud and clear. Although I think that you could use this frosting on a lot of types of cakes, I use it on an orange cake. If you haven't seen that recipe video, be sure to go check it out. Chocolate and orange go together very nicely, and in addition to the flavor combination, the color contrast between the brown chocolate frosting and the orange cake was very beautiful. Perfect for Halloween. However, I have to admit that I felt like the chocolate flavor of the frosting was very, very strong, and it kind of overpowered the orange flavor in the cake. That is why for my next cake, a chocolate cinnamon cake, I decided to remake the recipe, but this time using only 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder to make the chocolate cream cheese frosting. When I made the icing the second time, I did not sift anything. And as you can see, it looked like everything combined just fine. I debated whether or not to add any water to the second batch, and I ended up adding half of a tablespoon. Just like the first time I made the frosting, Adding a little bit of liquid made the frosting silky smooth. But honestly, I don't think it was absolutely necessary. Overall, I liked both versions of this frosting that I made, but in all honesty, I preferred the color of the first frosting, but the flavor of the second. Don't get me wrong, the first frosting with the 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder was definitely delicious. If you're a chocoholic, that's probably the one that you will want to make. However, in the second one with less cocoa powder, there is more of a tang in the background, and for some reason, I found it to be extremely delicious. I've never had a chocolate frosting that had that flavor profile before. Since I ended up liking the recipe in terms of taste more with 4 tablespoons than with 6, I'm glad that when I made the first batch, I did not add all 8 tablespoons at once. So this recipe is a good example of how when you're working with ingredients that have a strong flavor like cocoa powder or lemon juice or even salt, it's best to add a little as you go because like I said at the beginning of the video, it is always easier to add more later than to try to take away. The same goes for adding too much water. If you add too much water in the beginning, it can result in a soup or a stew that's really diluted and the broth doesn't have much flavor, or in the case of a frosting that doesn't have much thickness, doesn't have much body, and it's basically just running off of the cake. One more thing that I wanted to point out was that although pretty much everyone sifts their powdered sugar and cocoa powder when making cream cheese frosting, after doing it twice in a row, I don't think that it's necessary, especially if you're going to add water, because I felt like water or milk or cream, some sort of liquid, is going to help make the frosting very smooth. In short, I was really happy with how this chocolate cream cheese frosting without butter turned out. It had a great amount of chocolate flavor without being overly sweet or overly buttery. If you're looking for a quick and easy chocolate frosting recipe that can easily be adjusted to suit your tastes, be sure to give this one a try. It is the best. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.